In the cold depths of space, the Zorvith Empire had set its eyes on Earth. For years, their scouts had studied the human race. To them, Earth was just another weak planet, ripe for conquest. They had observed human wars, their struggles, and their limited technology. To the Zorvith, humans were nothing more than a primitive species, barely capable of defending themselves. They had conquered entire star systems without breaking a sweat. Earth, to them, was just a small hurdle. But that was about to change. It was a clear, silent evening on Earth. The world was oblivious to the incoming threat, going about its normal routines. In the quiet forests, bustling cities, and isolated mountains, humanity had no idea that in space, a fleet of Zorvith warships was preparing for battle. Their plan was simple: invade Earth, take its resources, and enslave its people. They had done it before with countless other civilizations, and there was no reason to believe that Earth would be any different. The Zorvith fleet, led by Commander Xarnak, descended upon the planet with speed and precision. Their ships were massive, their weapons deadly. They had no fear, no hesitation. As they entered Earth's atmosphere, their ships seemed like shadows in the sky. The human government scrambled, trying to understand what was happening, but it was too late. The Zorvath were already here. Commander Xarnak watched from the bridge of his ship as Earth's cities appeared beneath him. His face showed no emotion, but his mind was calculating. He had faced countless worlds and civilizations, all of them easy to crush. Humans, to him, were no different. Their weapons were primitive, their defenses weak. They would fall, just like the others. However, there was something about Earth that caught his attention. The planet was strangely quiet, almost like it was waiting for something. Xarnak couldn't explain it. Was it fear, or was it something more? He dismissed it as the typical reaction to invasion, but deep down, he felt an unfamiliar twinge of unease. On the ground, humanity was beginning to realize that the threat was real. News broadcasts flashed across screens worldwide, showing the first signs of the alien invasion. Panic spread like wildfire. Governments scrambled to coordinate a defense, but Earth's technology was no match for the Zorvith warships. Fighter jets were sent to intercept, but they were destroyed in mere seconds. Ground forces mobilized, but it was clear Earth stood no chance. Amidst the chaos, a young linguist named Dr. Aria Williams sat in her study, watching the news with a deep sense of dread. She had spent her entire career studying ancient languages, long-forgotten tongues of civilizations that had come and gone. But one language had always fascinated her, a language spoken by an ancient race, one believed to be long extinct: the Zorvith. The ancient records spoke of a time when the Zorvith had been a dominant force in the galaxy. They had conquered and enslaved countless civilizations, including one that had spoken a language nearly identical to the language of the Zorvith. But over time, that language had faded into obscurity, buried in the annals of history. It had never been fully understood, its true meaning lost to time. But Aria had found something that no one else had. In a dusty corner of an ancient library, she had uncovered a relic, an artifact that contained the key to the Zorvith language. It was a book, old and worn, but it held within it the missing pieces. For years, Aria had studied it in secret, piecing together the fragments of a language long forgotten. As the invasion unfolded, Aria couldn't shake the feeling that the Zorvith had come for a reason. They didn't just want Earth's resources, they wanted something more. She knew that she had to act, but what could one person do against such an overwhelming force? Then the answer came to her. Aria realized that the language she had been studying might be the key. The Zorvith language was not just a means of communication, it held power. It was said that speaking the language could unlock the hidden potential of ancient technologies, ones that the Zorvith had long used to dominate the galaxy. If humans could speak the language, they might stand a chance. With a sense of urgency, Aria reached out to the military, but her message was met with skepticism. The world was in chaos, and no one seemed to understand the significance of the ancient language. The Zorvath were already here, and humanity was losing the fight. Aria was almost ready to give up when, suddenly, she received a cryptic message. "We need to be ready for anything," Kane said, his voice firm. "The Federation is only part of the picture. We need to figure out what's drawing this force in and how we can defend against it." Aria nodded, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that the language she had unlocked was the key to everything. But how could she use it to stop what was coming? She didn't have the answers yet, but she had no time to waste. The Federation was already preparing for the final assault on Earth, and the ancient force was drawing closer with every passing moment. As the days passed, the eerie presence that Aria had felt intensified. It was no longer a whisper. It was a full-blown storm in her mind. She could feel the ancient energy swirling around her, feeding on her fear, her doubt. It was as if the very fabric of the universe was warping in response to the power humanity had unleashed. The Federation's fleet was already in position, their weapons primed for an all-out assault. Aria and Kane had no choice but to face them head-on, but the unknown force was still lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. "Get the fleet ready," Kane ordered. "We can't afford to hesitate. If the Federation wants a fight, they'll get one. But we have to remember, we're not just fighting for Earth anymore. We're fighting for something much bigger. The galaxy is watching, and they won't let us fall." Aria stood at the edge of the command deck, staring out at the vast expanse of space. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Humanity had already defied the odds once, but this time, the stakes were higher. The Federation was only a small part of the equation. What lay ahead could change the galaxy forever. She whispered to herself, almost as a prayer, "We must be ready for whatever comes next. We have to survive. We have to show them that humans are more than just a threat. We are the future." But as she spoke, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to face something far worse than the Federation, something that would test everything they knew about power, life, and death. The battle raged on in the vastness of space, the hum of weapons fire, and the roar of engines reverberating through the command center. The Federation's fleet had launched their first wave, and the Earth's defenses were holding steady, barely. Humanity's warships fought valiantly, their advanced weapons and newfound resilience making a difference, but it was clear that they were still outnumbered. The Federation, relentless and well-coordinated, had not given up. But even as the battle unfolded, something far more dangerous was stirring. The ancient presence that Aria had sensed grew stronger by the second. It was no longer a distant whisper. It was a violent storm crashing against her mind, drawing closer to Earth with every passing moment. "Aria," Kane's voice was sharp, cutting through the chaos. "We need to focus. The Federation is pushing us back. What's happening with that energy? Why isn't it working as we thought?" Aria's eyes were wide with a mix of fear and determination. She had no time to explain fully, but she knew that the real battle had yet to come. The Federation might have been their immediate threat, but the power they had unlocked, the language they had spoken, had woken something much older, something far more powerful than anything they had ever imagined. She turned to Kane, her voice shaky but resolute. "It's not just the Federation. The ancient force, it's coming. And it's not just a weapon, Kane. It's a living entity, a force that's tied to the very fabric of reality itself. It's been dormant for millennia, waiting for someone to awaken it." Kane's face darkened as the realization hit him. "And now it's coming for Earth." Aria's voice rose in volume, the ancient language flowing more naturally from her lips. With each phrase, she felt the power of the words taking hold, growing stronger, shifting the very atmosphere around her. The walls of the temple began to vibrate, and the floor beneath her feet felt alive, pulsing with energy. At first, nothing happened. There was no sudden explosion, no overwhelming force. The temple remained eerily still, as if waiting for something to happen. But Arya knew better than to think the language was simply an ancient relic. She had spent years researching it, studying the texts, and unlocking the secrets hidden within its syllables. It was far more than just a way to communicate. It was a key to unlocking a power that had been dormant for centuries. As she continued to speak, a low hum began to rise from the ground, vibrating through the soles of her boots. The air around her grew thicker, charged with an unfamiliar energy. It was as if the very fabric of space itself was bending to her will. Arya could feel it, the power of the language taking hold of the world around her. The Zorvath were not the only ones who possessed advanced technology. Humans had a power they had never even realized, hidden deep in their history, and now Arya was awakening it. The temple's walls began to glow, ancient symbols and inscriptions lighting up in response to her voice. The carvings on the stones seemed to shift, rearranging themselves as if they were alive. The language wasn't just speaking to her, it was speaking through her, activating the dormant power within the temple. Back outside, General Kane and his team watched nervously from their position. The Zorvath had not yet noticed anything unusual, but they could feel the tension in the air. The fleet hovered just above the planet, waiting for the command to attack. They had no idea that their invasion had already triggered something far beyond their understanding. The ancient language, spoken by a single human, was altering the very balance of power in the galaxy. As Arya continued to speak, a new sensation washed over her. It was as if the temple itself was alive, responding to her every word. The power was growing stronger, and she could feel the temple's energy reaching out to the Zorvath ships in orbit. For the first time, the Zorvath were not in control. The power of the ancient language was shifting the tide in humanity's favor. Suddenly, a surge of energy erupted from the ground, and a bright light filled the temple. The ground cracked open, revealing hidden machinery buried beneath the earth for millennia. The energy that had been dormant for so long was now active, and it was powerful beyond imagination. Arya's voice trembled as she continued to speak, her words echoing through the chamber. She had no idea what she had just unleashed, but she knew one thing for certain. It was their last hope. Outside, the Zorvath fleet suddenly faltered. Their ships, once so sure of their dominance, began to shake and wobble in the sky. The Zorvath commanders stared in confusion at their instruments. The sensors on their ships were malfunctioning, and their weapons systems were suddenly offline. It was as if an invisible force was blocking their power. "What is happening?" one of the Zorvath officers demanded. "We've lost control of the fleet." On the ground, General Kane watched in disbelief as the Zorvath ships began to break apart in midair. It was not the result of an explosion, but rather some kind of internal collapse. The ships' hulls were warping, twisting, and their engines were flickering out of existence. The Zorvath had no idea what was happening, but one thing was clear. They were losing their grip on the battle. Arya didn't stop. She couldn't. The language was flowing through her, becoming part of her very being. The Zorvath ships continued to fall from the sky, their once imposing forms now tumbling to the earth like leaves in a storm. They were helpless against the power Arya had unleashed. The humans, once seen as inferior, were now the ones in control. It was then that the first message from the Zorvath came through the communication channels, a transmission broadcasted to the Earth's military forces, filled with static, yet unmistakable in its urgency. The voice that came through was panicked and pleading. "We surrender. Please, stop the power. We beg you." The message reverberated through every communication channel, and the shock on the human side was palpable. The Zorvath, the mighty invaders who had once thought themselves invincible, were begging for mercy. Arya's mind raced. What if the language she had unlocked was not just a tool for war? What if it was a message, a warning, perhaps? The ancient civilization that had left behind the knowledge had clearly known something. But what? The ancient texts she had studied in the temple were the key, but they were incomplete. She needed to understand more. There were fragments of information, cryptic clues that hinted at something even more dangerous than the Federation. A force, an entity that had been watching Earth long before humanity had even realized the galaxy was out there. Something older and more powerful than anything the Federation could ever dream of controlling. As the Federation fleet loomed in the distance, Arya knew that the time for answers was now. Humanity's survival didn't just depend on fighting back. It depended on understanding the true nature of the power they had awakened. She turned to Kane. "We're going to have to fight back, but we also need to learn everything we can about the forces that are coming for us. If we can tap into the full potential of this ancient language, we might have a chance." Kane's eyes narrowed, his resolve hardening. "You're right. The Federation might be the immediate threat, but something much bigger is waiting in the wings. We can't afford to be caught off guard again." The countdown had begun. The Federation's fleet was moving into position, and Earth's fate was hanging in the balance. Arya and General Kane had only one choice: to fight, to learn, and to hope that the power they had unlocked could save them from the oncoming storm. But there was one thing that both of them knew for certain. This was only the beginning. The galaxy had just been reminded of humanity's potential, and the consequences of that reminder were about to unfold. The days leading up to the impending battle were filled with tension. The Federation had positioned its fleet at the edge of Earth's atmosphere, waiting for the right moment to strike. On Earth, humanity stood at the edge of a precipice, uncertain of whether they would survive the coming storm or be wiped from existence. Arya spent her nights poring over ancient texts and symbols, trying to decipher the hidden language that had unlocked the mysterious power within her. The more she learned, the more she realized that what they had tapped into was not just a weapon. It was a force that could change the course of the galaxy itself. A force so powerful that it had been sealed away, forgotten by time, waiting for the right moment to return. Meanwhile, General Kane was preparing Earth's defenses. Despite their newfound power, they were vastly outnumbered. The Federation's ships were beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. Their size, firepower, and advanced technology were intimidating, to say the least. But there was something else, something that didn't sit right with Kane. The Federation's fleet was too well coordinated, almost too perfect. He had fought in countless battles. But this felt different. There was a hidden force at work, something he couldn't yet identify. But he was certain it wasn't just the Federation's might. The Federation had underestimated humanity once before, and Kane had no intention of letting them do so again. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered his commanders. "We fight like we've never fought before. We show them what we're capable of." But even as the preparations for war began, a sense of unease lingered in the air. The language Arya had uncovered, the ancient words of an unknown civilization, had done something to the very fabric of reality. It wasn't just a code or a key, it was an invitation. And now something ancient was waking up, drawn to the power that had been awakened on Earth. Arya felt it first, a cold, distant presence that seemed to reach out from the farthest corners of the galaxy. At first, it was just a whisper, a shadow at the edge of her consciousness. But as she meditated on the ancient language, the whisper grew louder, clearer. It was as if the very language itself was speaking to her, telling her that the time had come. The awakening was no longer a distant event. It was happening right now. "What's happening?" Arya whispered aloud, her voice barely audible in the stillness of the command center. Kane had just entered, his eyes narrowing in concern as he saw the tension on her face. "What's wrong?" he asked, his tone sharp. "I can feel it," Arya said, her voice trembling. "Something is coming. It's not just the Federation. There's something else, something ancient that's been waiting for this moment." Kane's heart skipped a beat. He had always believed that humanity was destined for greatness, but this felt like something much more significant than they had ever realized. The Federation might have been their immediate enemy, but there was something far more dangerous looming in the distance, a force older than anything humanity had encountered. The voice crackled with static, but the meaning was clear. The Zorveth had failed, but they were far from finished. Their message wasn't just about revenge. It was a message to the galaxy. Earth had become a target, and if the Zorveth were defeated, others would rise up to take their place. "We don't have much time," Kane said, his voice urgent. "The Federation is already mobilizing. They won't sit back and watch us rise to power. We need to make sure we're ready for the war that's coming." Aria looked at the message, her mind racing. The language she had spoken was just a small piece of a much larger puzzle. The power that had been unlocked was not merely a weapon, it was a key to understanding a greater force, one that could give humanity the edge they needed to survive in the vast, dangerous galaxy. "I will learn everything I can," Aria said, determination in her eyes. "The Federation thinks we're a threat now, and they're right. We are, but they don't know the truth. We're just getting started." The war they had won was only the beginning of a much larger battle. A battle that would shape the future of humanity and decide its place in the galaxy. Aria was ready. Humanity was ready. And they would not be underestimated again. As the days passed, the quiet that followed the victory over the Zorveth began to feel more like a heavy silence. Aria could feel it. Something was coming. Something larger and more dangerous than anything they had faced before. And it wasn't just the Federation they needed to worry about. The galaxy was full of unknowns, waiting to see how humanity would react after this first confrontation. General Kane spent sleepless nights staring at data reports and intelligence from across the galaxy. There were whispers now, rumors, that something darker than the Zorveth was moving in the shadows. The galactic powers were shifting, and humanity was at the center of it all. In the quiet of the command center, Aria sat alone, her thoughts deep in the ancient language that had caused such chaos. It wasn't just a weapon. No, it was more like a key. The key to an ancient power that had been hidden for millennia. She didn't yet understand it fully, but she could feel its pull, the deep well of potential waiting for her to unlock it. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden crackle on the comm system. A cold, calculating voice filled the room. "This is the Galactic Federation," the voice announced, its tone filled with an eerie finality. "You have proven yourselves formidable, but you are out of your depth. The galaxy is no longer a place for the weak. You have attracted the attention of those far beyond your comprehension. We do not tolerate threats to the balance." The transmission ended abruptly, but the words hung in the air, heavy with menace. Aria turned to Kane, who was already standing by her side, his face drawn with concern. "They've noticed us," he muttered, "and they're not happy about it. We've crossed a line, Aria. The Federation. They see us as a threat now. The galaxy's natural order has been disrupted, and they will not let it go unchallenged." Aria's hands tightened into fists. She had known it was coming. After all, humans had made their mark on the galaxy with a power no one had seen before. But knowing it was coming didn't make it any easier. "We can't back down," Aria said firmly. "We've proven we can fight back, but they need to know we're not afraid. If we show fear, we've already lost." Kane nodded. "You're right. But we need to understand what they're really capable of. The Federation is vast, and we've only seen a small part of it." In the days that followed, the Federation made their intentions clear. A fleet of ships, massive and imposing, arrived at the edges of Earth's orbit. They were not here to negotiate. They were here to end this human uprising before it could gain any more momentum. The Federation's message was blunt. Humanity had defied the natural order. And for that, there would be consequences. Their fleets would lay waste to Earth if necessary. This was no longer a war for survival. It was a battle for humanity's right to exist in the galaxy. "We're facing something beyond us, Aria," Kane said, his voice grim. "The Federation is one thing, but there are forces in this galaxy that don't care about the balance. They care about power, and they will do whatever it takes to keep humanity from rising." The Zorveth's arrogance had blinded them to the truth. The humans were not powerless. They had the potential to wield a force even the most advanced alien species in the galaxy could not comprehend. And now, humanity had proven it. But as Arya stood in the temple, the power of the language still coursing through her, she knew the fight wasn't over. The Zorveth had surrendered for now, but there was always a chance they would come back, stronger than before. Humanity had won a battle, but the war was far from over. The true power of the ancient language had just begun to reveal itself, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Zorvath were defeated, but the victory felt too surreal. General Kane stood in his command center, watching as the last of the Zorvath ships disintegrated in the sky. Their invasion fleet had turned into a collection of falling debris, now scattered across the battlefield like a broken mirror reflecting humanity's once doubtful power. It was hard to believe that a single human, Arya, had managed to do what entire armies could not. Yet even as the last enemy vessel fell, there was a growing sense of unease. The galaxy was vast, and the Zorvath were not the only species who had been observing Earth. There were others out there, more powerful, more advanced, and they had their own designs for the human race. The idea that Earth might be left alone, simply because one species had been defeated, seemed like an impossible dream. "We need to prepare for what's coming," Kane muttered, looking at his staff. "This victory is just the beginning. The Zorvath might be down, but someone will take their place." Arya stood in the ruins of the ancient temple, her breath shallow but steady. Her hands still tingled with the aftershock of the language's power, and her mind was filled with echoes of the ancient words she had spoken. The Zorvath fleet had been shattered, but the real weight of her actions was beginning to settle in. What had she just unlocked? What kind of force had she unleashed upon the galaxy? The temple, which had once been a place of mystery and legend, was now a symbol of humanity's potential. But even as Arya looked over the remnants of the ancient stone, she couldn't shake the feeling that something far greater was at play. She had done something no one had expected, but in doing so, she had also opened a door. And doors, once opened, could never be closed again. "Arya, we need to talk." General Kane's voice crackled over the communication system. She didn't hesitate to respond. "I'll be there shortly," she said, her voice firm but tired. She had a sense that this was far from over. If the Zorvath had been the first to come to Earth, then they wouldn't be the last. The moment Arya stepped into the command center, every eye in the room turned toward her. There was no celebration, no applause. Everyone knew that, while the enemy had been defeated, something even more dangerous was on the horizon. "Kane," Arya began, her voice filled with resolve. "We've bought ourselves some time, but the galaxy's attention is on us now. We've just demonstrated that humans are not only capable of defending ourselves, but that we can wield powers that rival the most advanced races." Kane nodded grimly. "That's true, but it also makes us a target. A dangerous one. What we did today will send ripples across the stars. Our actions will be scrutinized, and other species will wonder what else we're capable of. We've just been marked." The Council had already issued a warning. The Zorvath were not the only force in the galaxy who had been watching Earth. The real threat, the one they had always feared, was the Galactic Federation, the coalition of the universe's most powerful species. And if they knew that humanity could hold its own, they might decide it was time to take action. "Do you think they'll come for us?" Arya asked. "It's hard to say, but we can't ignore the possibility." "We need to be ready," Kane replied, his gaze hardening. The threat of retaliation was looming. As Arya sat in the command center, she realized the true weight of their situation. The Zorvath, for all their power and arrogance, had been just the tip of the iceberg. The real danger was much bigger, and far more capable. Suddenly, the communication system beeped, alerting the team to a new transmission. It was from the Zorvath. But it wasn't a plea for mercy, it was a warning. "General Kane, Arya," the transmission began. "You have no idea what you've just unleashed. You may have defeated us, but the galaxy is no longer what it was. The Federation is watching, and you will soon know the true cost of defying the natural order." It was from a military officer, someone who had listened to her message. He had seen something in the Zorvath attack that others had missed, a pattern, a hint that there was more to this invasion than simple conquest. He believed in the power of language and asked Aria to meet him. With no time to waste, Aria rushed to the meeting. The officer, General Kane, was a hardened soldier who had fought in countless battles, but even he seemed uncertain about how to face the Zorvath. However, after hearing Aria's theory, he agreed to take the risk. If the ancient language could indeed hold the key to defeating the Zorvath, they had to try. And so, the plan began. Aria would be the first human to speak the Zorvath language in centuries. She would stand before the enemy, hoping that her knowledge of an ancient tongue could change the course of history. As the Zorvath fleet loomed overhead, humanity's only hope lay in the hands of a linguist who had been dismissed as a mere scholar. But now, she had the power to change everything. The first contact had begun. The Zorvath fleet hung in the sky, casting massive shadows over the planet. From the ground, the people of Earth could only watch in awe and terror as the invaders prepared to strike. The panic and fear had reached its peak, and it seemed like humanity's fate was sealed. No military force, no matter how advanced, stood a chance against the alien ships. Yet, amidst the chaos, a quiet glimmer of hope remained, tucked away in the mind of Dr. Aria Williams. She stood before General Kane in a high-security military facility, her heart racing as the weight of what she was about to do sank in. The entire world was watching, though only a handful knew the true significance of her actions. The ancient language she had studied for so long, the one that had once belonged to the Zorvath's long-lost ancestors, was now humanity's last chance. It was a language forgotten by time, buried beneath millennia of history, but Aria knew it could hold the key to understanding the Zorvath. General Kane paced back and forth in front of her, his face stern and unreadable. He had heard Aria's theory, but like most military leaders, he was skeptical. "We're talking about an ancient language that's been extinct for centuries," he said, his voice gruff. "How could that possibly help us now? The Zorvath have unimaginable technology. They've destroyed every human resistance force so far." Aria took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. The Zorvath's technology is powerful, yes, but they're not invincible. The language I've been studying isn't just a tool for communication. It's a conduit for an ancient power. If I can speak it, if I can unlock its true potential, it might give us an edge. It's a risk, but it's the only chance we have. Kane stopped pacing and looked at her, his gaze hard but understanding. "So you're saying that by speaking this language, we could somehow control their technology, gain access to something we don't understand?" "Yes," Aria replied, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her chest. The ancient Zorvath believed their language had the power to manipulate energy, control weapons, and even influence the very fabric of the galaxy. "If I can speak it, we may be able to turn their own weapons against them." Kane was silent for a moment, considering her words. Then, he nodded slowly. "I don't know if this will work, but we don't have any other options. The Zorvath will be here soon. If you're right, this could change everything. But you need to be careful. We can't afford to fail." Aria nodded in agreement. She didn't know what would happen when she spoke the ancient language. She only knew that it was the last hope humanity had. She had spent years studying it, but speaking it aloud for the first time felt different. She could feel the weight of history pressing down on her, and the power that was contained within those long-forgotten words. As Aria prepared for her mission, General Kane ordered a strike team to be ready in case things went wrong. They would protect her at all costs, but there was no certainty that this plan would even work. The Zorvath were ruthless, and if they discovered what Aria was trying to do, they wouldn't hesitate to eliminate her. Meanwhile, the Zorvath continued their invasion, systematically obliterating human defenses. Earth's cities burned, and the skies were filled with the sounds of war. But the Zorvath had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity's will to survive, and they had overlooked the power hidden in humanity's ancient history. As the day wore on, Aria's team prepared to make their way to the site where they would face the Zorvath. It was an ancient temple, a relic of a time long past, where the language had first been spoken. According to the research she had uncovered, the temple held the key to unlocking the full potential of the language. Aria stepped into the ruins, her heart pounding in her chest. The air was thick with dust, and the walls seemed to whisper with ancient secrets. She knew she was about to do something that would change the course of history forever. The Zorvath were approaching, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance. "Are you ready?" General Kane asked, his voice crackling through the communicator. Aria glanced around the ancient chamber, taking in the worn stone walls, the faded carvings, and the eerie silence. She didn't answer immediately, instead focusing on the book she held in her hands. It was the last remaining record of the language, the one she had spent years decoding. She had memorized every word, every symbol. She could feel the energy pulsing from the book, as if it were alive, waiting to be spoken. "I'm ready," she said at last, her voice steady. She took a deep breath, then began to speak. At first, the words felt strange on her tongue, ancient syllables that seemed to resonate with the very air around her. But as she continued, something began to shift. The words grew stronger, more powerful, as if they were unlocking something deep within the temple. A low hum filled the room, and the air grew charged with energy. Outside, the Zorvath fleet continued its advance, unaware that they were walking into a trap. Their arrogance would be their undoing, for the language Aria spoke was not just a forgotten tongue. It was a weapon, one that could change the tide of the battle. As Aria's voice echoed through the ruins, the ground beneath her feet trembled. The power of the language surged through her, and she felt herself connected to something far greater than herself. The ancient secrets of the Zorvath were being unlocked, and humanity's survival depended on what she did next. But would the language truly have the power to turn the tide? Or would it unleash a force far more dangerous than anyone could have anticipated? The countdown to the Zorvath's arrival had begun, and for the first time, humans were about to face an enemy they could understand. The air crackled with an electric charge as Aria's voice echoed through the ancient temple. Each word she spoke seemed to resonate with the walls, sending ripples of energy through the very fabric of reality. The Zorvath had never expected anything like this. Their confidence, once unshakable, began to waver as the ground beneath their feet trembled. Outside the temple, the Zorvath fleet was in position, their ships lining the sky, ready to strike. Their weapons were pointed down at Earth, their sights fixed on the planet that had resisted them for so long. The invaders were prepared to wipe out humanity once and for all. They had underestimated humans for decades, believing them to be nothing more than insects to be crushed beneath their heels. But today, they were about to face something they could never have predicted. Aria nodded, the weight of the truth crashing down on her like a wave. She had hoped that the ancient language could be used as a weapon, something to help them defeat the Federation. But what she had awakened was something far more dangerous than she had ever anticipated. The energy surrounding them was no longer just a force. They had called it into existence, and now it was coming to Earth, drawn to their presence. And once it arrived, there would be no turning back. "We have to stop it," Aria said urgently. "We can't let it reach Earth." Kane's eyes were filled with determination as he surveyed the battlefield. His orders were clear: protect Earth, no matter the cost. But deep down, he knew that the true fight was not with the Federation anymore. It was with the ancient force that was about to breach their defenses. Suddenly, the sensors went off, signaling an anomaly in the space-time continuum. Aria's heart skipped a beat. It's here. The skies above Earth darkened, and a massive, swirling vortex appeared in the distance, pulling everything toward it. The Federation's fleet halted in mid-flight, their ships seemingly powerless against the force that was appearing in front of them. "What is that?" Kane muttered, staring at the vortex with a mixture of awe and fear. "It's the Force," Aria whispered, "and it's coming for all of us." The Federation, once so confident in their victory, was now frozen in shock. Their ships tried to retreat, but the vortex was growing, expanding at an impossible rate. The very fabric of space and time seemed to warp and stretch under its power. The Federation's weapons, no matter how advanced, were useless against the oncoming storm. The massive energy that had once been a whisper was now a roar, louder than anything Aria had ever felt. It called to her, and she knew that her connection to it was the key to understanding what was happening. She had awakened it, but now she needed to control it, to stop it before it destroyed everything. But as the vortex loomed over Earth, Aria realized that this was not just a battle for survival. It was a fight for the soul of the galaxy itself. The ancient force, once thought to be a myth, was now a living reality, and it was about to change everything. "We can't stop it with force alone," Aria said, her voice trembling but strong. "We have to use the language. We have to speak to it." Kane's eyes widened. "Speak to it? Are you out of your mind?" But Aria knew this was their only chance. The ancient force had been awakened by the language, and it could only be controlled by understanding it, by connecting with it on a level that no one had ever considered. She closed her eyes, her mind flooding with the ancient symbols, the forgotten words that had once been used to harness the power of the universe. She reached deep within herself, drawing on the energy that flowed through her, the energy that had connected her to the ancient beings who had sealed away this force long ago. She began to speak, the words flowing from her like a torrent, the language ringing out across space and time. The vortex began to slow, its swirling energy faltering as Aria's words reached the very heart of the ancient force. At first, there was silence. Then, the vortex began to collapse in on itself, its power dissipating as Aria's voice grew stronger. The Federation's ships, still caught in the gravitational pull, watched in awe as the storm of energy that had threatened to consume them all began to vanish. The battle was not over yet, but humanity had proven that they were no longer the underdogs. They had spoken the language no one should know, and in doing so, they had changed the course of the galaxy forever. As the last remnants of the ancient force vanished into the void, Aria stood tall, knowing that the universe would never be the same again.